bustling New York City, we find Jonathan, an unassuming man in his 30s. By day, he's an accountant for a major trading firm, lost in a sea of numbers and intricate equations. But as the sun dips below the horizon, the man of numbers fades away, and a monster takes his place.
When night descends, I morph into something sinister. A voice, dark and chilling, echoes in my mind, ordering me to kill women. It doesn't just dictate the body count, it sketches out the gruesome details of each crime I'm to commit. The voice never subsides. It only grows more potent and distinct with every victim.
The onset was a struggle for Jonathan, guilt and fear gnawing at his conscience. Yet as time wore on, he started to surrender to the voice, following its commands without a second thought. The frequency of his crimes escalated, each one more horrifying than the last. His inaugural act was both savage and ghastly. He singled out his first victim meticulously, a young woman working in a local shop. Lurking in the shadows, he waited until she left for the night, then violently pulled her into a dim alleyway. With a knife as sharp and cold as his intent, he slowly cut her throat, savoring every second of her suffering. He left her lifeless body there, sprawled on the ground in a crimson pool. The subsequent crimes were even more brutal and terrifying. One night he invaded a woman's apartment, murdering her with unparalleled savagery. He left her mutilated body hanging from the ceiling, a gruesome testament to his monstrous acts. His tools of terror varied with each crime, from knives and saws to surgical instruments, each leaving behind a horrifying tableau of his violent deeds. As these atrocities sent waves of fear through the city's populace, no one could identify the monster behind them. Jonathan skillfully used disguise and stealth to evade law enforcement, leaving no trace that could lead back to him. His days were spent living an ordinary life, while his nights were consumed by his murderous alter ego. As the days rolled into weeks, Jonathan's descent into the abyss of darkness became irreversible. The voice in his head, once a whisper, had now become a thunderous command, dictating his every move, every choice of victim, every execution. Each life he took amplified the voice's power, and his notoriety spread like wildfire.
Fear is a potent perfume, and it's beginning to permeate the city. They don't venture out alone at night anymore. The police are scrambling, their investigations leading them to dead ends.
Officer Jackson, the detective heading the case, was a picture of frustration and fury. His leads were non-existent, his evidence scarce. All he had were the lifeless bodies of innocent women and a city full of unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Jonathan was a master of duality. By day, he was an ordinary man, sharing laughs with colleagues, immersing himself in his work. But as dusk fell, he transformed into the embodiment of terror.
The voice is growing stronger, and I find myself succumbing to it more with each passing night. I've started to plan my crimes with meticulous precision, selecting my victims with care, leaving behind scenes that scream of the terror gripping the city.
These were the early days of the reign of an unidentified terror, a phantom who instilled fear in the hearts of New York's residents. But this was merely the beginning. The worst was yet to come. In response to the rising tide of terror, the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in, deploying their ace agent, Daniel. Known for cracking the most complex of cases, Daniel found himself facing an adversary unlike any other.
I'm trailing his steps, trying to connect the dots, but he's always a step ahead. It's as if he's anticipating my every move.
The city was in the grip of an ever-intensifying fear. The crimes were growing more gruesome, the tally of victims rising steadily. Whispers of dread spread among the populace, their hearts invaded by the terror of an unpredictable killer.
The frustration, the anger, it's mounting. I know I can crack this case, but he's always one step ahead. The pressure is immense, but I'm not backing down.
One dark night, Daniel found himself surrounded by scattered photos in his office. Victims, evidence, city maps. He was back at it again, connecting the dots, searching for a pattern or a clue that would lead him to the killer. Meanwhile, Jonathan was plotting his next move. The voice in his head was growing louder, the urge to kill stronger. He knew Daniel was on his tail, but fear was a stranger to him. On the contrary, he was relishing the chase.
The game is on.
These were the early days of the deadly dance between Daniel and Jonathan, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. But this was merely the prologue. The worst was yet to come. On a fog-enshrouded night, Agent Daniel was hot on the trail of new leads. These clues were different, shrouded in mystery and intrigue, as if leading him towards an unexpected revelation. After endless hours of painstaking investigation and intricate analysis, he found himself standing before Jonathan's secret lair.
The place reeked of malevolence, shadows lurking ominously in the corners. But I didn't falter. I stepped inside.
Inside, Daniel found chilling remnants of Jonathan's gruesome deeds. Photographs of his victims, ominous murder tools, city maps marked with the locations of his heinous crimes. The lair was a terrifying testament to Jonathan's monstrosity. Suddenly, a mysterious sound echoed behind him. He spun around to find nothing but silence. And when he turned back, Jonathan had vanished.
That moment, it was a game changer. It sparked a resolve in me, stronger than ever, to catch Jonathan.
While Daniel stood amidst the darkness, frustration and anger seething within him, Jonathan was slipping away into the night. Their conflict had reached a crossroads. The stakes were clear. Things were about to get much more complicated.
The game continues.
On a frigid, shadowy night, the city was shrouded in a dense fog. Amidst this gloom, Daniel was stealthily tracking Jonathan. Jonathan, prowling the darkened alleyways, was on the hunt for his next victim. But Daniel was ready.
I had been waiting for this moment, biding my time, collecting evidence.
After hours of relentless pursuit, Daniel found himself face to face with Jonathan. A ferocious fight broke out, each moment teetering on the edge of peril. They both brought their full strength and cunning to this climactic battle. But in the end, it was Daniel's determination and bravery that prevailed. He found a chink in Jonathan's armor and managed to apprehend him before he could strike again.
I had him. I finally had him.
Jonathan was sent to prison, his reign of terror finally over. A fitting end for a man who had sown fear in the hearts of many. And Daniel? He became the city's hero. His courage and honor in the face of danger were unparalleled. He had saved his beloved city from ruin and proved that he was not just a skilled detective, but a true hero.
This was a turning point in my life. I proved to myself and everyone else that I was ready to make sacrifices for others.
Deep in the bowels of his icy, pitch-black cell, Jonathan was grappling with his inner demons. The voice of conscience in his head was unyielding, pounding like relentless war drums. But he, a pitiful creature, was no longer able to obey this domineering voice. The walls of his cell seemed to close in on him, threatening to swallow him whole. The voices that once drove him had fallen into a deafening silence. He felt isolated and desperate, yet somewhere deep down, he understood that this was the retribution he had earned. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Daniel was basking in his victory. He was relishing the accolades and gratitude from the city's residents. He felt a sense of fulfillment from his commendable work, yet a nagging feeling in his heart reminded him that the battle was far from over.
No matter how well I do, there will always be another killer lurking somewhere.
Daniel knew that there would always be someone lying in wait, ready to rise and commence a horrifying killing spree. This realization weighed heavily on him, yet it also fueled his resolve to remain vigilant and prepared. So, while Jonathan languished in his personal hell and Daniel reveled in his triumph, the stage was silently being set for a new predator to emerge. But whoever this new threat was, Daniel was primed to face them. He understood that peace was merely an illusion, and that darkness was always poised to strike. But he was ready. Always ready.